Today, I'm going to discuss due diligence and specifically the inspection period and what the seller legally needs to disclose and what does not need to be disclosed. Let's break it down. Once an offer has been accepted, it now becomes a contract and the buyer embarks on the due diligence portion of the transaction. At the same time, the inspection period begins. It is 10 days unless otherwise specified in writing. Now, these are calendar days, not business days. The inspection period is the buyer's opportunity to do research and inspect the property and gain a more accurate understanding of the true condition, for good or for bad. The inspection contingency is probably the most well-known in the contract. Not only should the buyer focus on the property, but it's also important to check out the neighborhood and general area. Essentially, anything the buyer feels is important. Now let's talk about what a buyer should do during the inspection period. First, there are tools available to the buyer to assist them in their due diligence during the inspection period. The contract mentions two disclosures: the seller property disclosure statement and the insurance claims history. The seller property disclosure statement, also referred to as the SPDS or SPDS, is designed to assist the seller in disclosing material facts about the property which is required by Arizona law. Failure to make the legally required disclosures may expose the seller to civil liability. Now, this is the most common area where sellers get into trouble: failure to disclose. Even if the buyer and the seller agree that the SPDS is not required, the disclosure obligation still remains. The disclosure obligation even extends to the point where if the buyer asks the seller about an aspect of the property, the seller has the duty to disclose the information, even if the seller does not consider this information important. This brings up another question. Is there anything the seller is not required to disclose? Well, according to Arizona revised statutes 32-2156, sellers are not required to disclose if, number one, the property has been the site of a natural death, suicide, homicide, or any other crime classified as a felony, and two, owned or occupied by a person exposed to or having HIV, and number three, if the property is located in the vicinity of a sex offender. The seller property disclosure statement should be delivered to the buyer within 3 calendar days after contract acceptance. Failure by the seller to deliver the SPDS may result in a delayed response from the buyer. The second seller disclosure is the insurance claims history. Within 5 calendar days after contract acceptance, the seller should deliver an insurance claims history going back 5 years, or the length of time they've owned the home if it's less than 5. This could uncover recurring problems and be something the buyer wants an inspector to check to make sure any repairs were done properly. An important part is getting a home inspection by a licensed inspector. Even in newer homes, this is important. Just the other day, I was in a newer home with some AC concerns where we learned that the builder had cut some corners and even mislabeled breakers in the main electrical panel. Not good. For older homes, it could be even more important. I have another video that talks about specific issues to be aware of with older homes. Remember, the inspector is doing a general home inspection, evaluating many different systems. There could be items found where he or she recommends a specialist or licensed professional, such as an AC company, plumber, pool person, electrician, for a more detailed evaluation. For this reason, it's a good idea to schedule the inspection as early as possible so you're not trying to find a specialist on the 8th or 9th day of the inspection period. All inspections are paid by the buyer, except for the septic inspection. So let's talk about the buyer advisory. In the contract, it states that the buyer is advised to consult the buyer advisory to assist them in their due diligence. It provides a good checklist and items to investigate and be aware of, such as expansive soil, CC&Rs for the HOA, septic and sewer, wells and water concerns, sex offenders, crime statistics, and my personal favorite is the suggestion to talk to the neighbors. They have a wealth of information about the area, schools, parks, shopping, and traffic activity, and you get a sneak peek into who your future neighbors will be. They may even have some good insight into the house you're considering buying that the sellers did not share. All of this is to assist the buyers in completing the buyer inspection notice, which is due at the end of the inspection period, where the buyer chooses one of three options. Number one, accept the premises as is. Or two, cancel the contract and receive a refund of the earnest money. Or three, and the most common, request the seller address certain issues found during the inspection period to be completed at least 3 days prior to the close of escrow. So, in summary, use the inspection period to get a thorough understanding of the property by reviewing seller disclosures, researching important items in the buyer advisory, and having a home inspection done by a licensed inspector, which allows the buyer to make a well-informed decision regarding the next step, whether that is continuing with the transaction or canceling the contract. Now, I hope this has been helpful, and if you still have questions that I didn't answer, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.